Welcome to Go With The Workflow, where we interview world-class legal leaders and experts in workflow automation to learn from their hard-earned experiences in making work more efficient and more meaningful. Today, my guest is Erin Crum. Erin is a legal manager too at Pinterest, where she championed the first implementation of generative AI for her legal department. Before becoming a lawyer, Erin spent 7 years as an entrepreneur and continues to flex her general skill set, managing a team, optimizing legal operations, whilst being senior legal counsel for technology within Pinterest's commercial legal team. On this episode, we did a deep dive on using a shared email inbox for legal intake, what the legal request workflow looked like at Pinterest, the challenges with that, and how that changed when they implemented GenAI to monitor and respond to incoming emails. We talked about what it took to implement GenAI, the lessons learned, and fielded a few live audience questions on handling edge cases, maintenance, and change management. I was so glad to capture such a practical and candid discussion of an early-to-market live application of GenAI, so I hope you enjoy this episode. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started here. Thank you to everyone who has joined us here live today. If you haven't joined one of these sessions before, this is called Go With The Workflow. We are a series that invites legal operations professionals to come on board and to share their knowledge around process improvement, efficiency, and automation. My name is Evan Wong. I am the co-founder and CEO of Checkbox. And I have here a really special guest with me today, Erin Crum. One thing that I learned about Erin, I think she likes having plants around like I do. I remember the first time I met you, Erin, you were in a beautiful sun hat outdoors surrounded by plants. And the only difference, I think, between Erin and myself is that whilst her plants are real, mine are always fake and artificial because I can't trust myself to take care of plants. I'm not as good as a plant mum like you are. So with that, Erin, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Evan. Thank you so much. And we will work on your green thumb. I can help.
I'm gonna ask you for some tips because all of mine are, I'm not kidding, like mine are like artificial.
That's pretty artificial.
Yeah. Great, awesome. But otherwise, let's start off. Erin, I have an opening question for you. You didn't start your career in a law firm as a lawyer like most. Instead, you ended up building businesses. So tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, I definitely have a non-traditional background. I waited until I was in my late 20s to even decide to go to law school. Went to law school at 29. So before that, I was a makeup artist. I worked in real estate. I did corporate recruiting. So I had kind of some pretty good job experience before. And then when I graduated from law school, I went into compliance at Macy's.com, which was a really interesting intersection between technology and legal. It was like a primer on all things engineering and product. It really helped me understand those fields without actually being an engineer or a product manager. And then I had the opportunity to purchase I have a business partner. We purchased a small franchising company from retiring baby boomers. Ran that for about 6-7 years. I was also the lawyer. I was a baby lawyer at the time, but I was handling commercial leases, financial audits, all the stuff, kind of trying to figure it out as I went, leaning on law school friends and people I knew throughout the trades. And then we decided franchising wasn't the best fit after a few years. We just didn't love doing that, but we learned so much. We kept our corporate owned location, which we still run today. And then I went into various small kind of startup size companies and worked in-house on contracts, and then landed at Pinterest about 3 years ago.
Very cool. I can see, like being an entrepreneur myself, so many of the skills and challenges you face are sort of for the first time. And so naturally you have to kind of expand yourself into becoming a generalist. So I can see that in your background come through. I'm sure that is actually a strength of yours now in your role, which actually I want to ask a bit more about. You mentioned you're now legal, I think it's legal manager 2 at Pinterest. Most people, by the way, I assume would know of Pinterest, but just to get everyone on the same page, how would you describe the Pinterest business? And more importantly, how does legal's role fit into enabling the business goals?
Yeah, so Pinterest is basically it's a visual discovery platform. So anything that you're looking at, if you want to have inspiration on a home design of how to redo your living room, if you're looking for recipes, if you're looking for travel destination ideas, it's kind of the go-to discovery platform for someone seeking inspiration and to discover new things. From a legal perspective, our team runs the gamut. I mean, we look at intellectual property, and we have a team that deals with like trademarks and patents. We have a privacy team that deals with privacy laws. Those are always changing right now. It's a big time in that industry. We have folks on the product legal side, which means they're like embedded with engineering and product teams, helping them stay compliant with various laws and internal company policies. We have a compliance team, we have an employment team, we have a trust and safety team. That's a very important team for Pinterest that keeps Pinterest safe online. And then we have the commercial team, which is my team that I work under. My boss is the AGC of commercial, and she oversees the entire thing. I just have my section where I do probably like 70% of the time I'm doing contracts, and then about 30% I'm overseeing the legal ops team. And that's the team that supports the commercial attorneys and the commercial contracting process at Pinterest.
Very cool. I want to ask you a bit more about that kind of dual part of your role. But before I do that, I want to make a comment. Actually, I've used Pinterest very recently because I recently moved to New York City, a big change in my life. And I wanted to decorate my room, and I wanted to go for a Japandi look. So that's literally, I use Pinterest as an inspiration for what to buy. And that's, the little fake plant that I just held up was part of that decoration that I ended up doing, but it was inspired by Pinterest. Yeah.
Yes.
So on the dual side of your role, you mentioned 70% legal counsels, 30% legal operations. I know that on the legal operations side, you're responsible, of course, for many things. I think mainly under the umbrella of contracts, but broadly under the I guess the concept of like efficiency. So how do you think about efficiency in your role at Pinterest and specifically for the legal department?
It's a top priority. Efficiency is a really top priority for our team. It's kind of we've kind of evolved from being a smaller pre-IPO to then IPO, and now kind of this medium to growing size company, and we're trying to keep up with that scale. And so there's a lot of legacy processes that we just have to look at and say, what do we need to keep doing? And what is just something that we can streamline and get rid of? So that is a big part of our conversation currently within our team is what still makes sense to be doing? And what are we trying to solve for? Is it like a company risk? Is it just like we want to document stuff? Is it a customer service thing? And then thinking about, is there a better, more efficient way of handling that? Or can we just stop doing it? Because we have this big push right now on efficiency, very important. And it's kind of like the people, the processes, and the technology, trying to make those three things kind of fit together.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I was speaking to a room full of legal department leaders the other day at an event, and big part of the topic that I was leading was the point you made, which is there's a lot of work that ends up coming onto the desks of our lawyers and our legal team. And I think the default, because we want to be such great business partners, is to kind of just get through it and respond to everything and try to do everything. But what I picked up on your language is, what are the things that we don't want to be doing or should not be doing? And so it's actually a prioritization exercise and almost putting types of works and classifying them into different buckets and then right sourcing them, right? Like, this is the things that probably isn't even a legal question. Like, why is it coming to us? Is there a more efficient way to redirect it to finance or, people and culture? And for the things that do come to us, like, should a lawyer actually be working on this, or should it be, I don't know, self-service? Or today's topic, of course, is around AI. So that's definitely a very efficient way to think about efficiency.
Absolutely.
So when we met, by the way, one of the problems I think that you were looking to solve for was the idea of the shared mail inbox. And you've now solved that, or is solving that with AI. And I think that's what a lot of people who are joining us today are very much interested in, is seeing how we've implemented or are looking at AI together. What I find, if not all, if not almost all legal departments have this shared inbox, right? legal@companyxyz.com. And it's a great way to centralize requests, but there's still, I think, a lot of challenges that legal departments tend to face with this method. Things like someone still has to monitor that inbox, right? It's a real person reading, triaging, maybe responding sometimes, but definitely escalating to the right people to address that request. I've heard from other legal departments that there's a double up in work that sometimes happens because it is a shared alias inbox. People don't know which requests have been responded to already, and people are working on, and so there's a double up of work. Confusion when the advice might be slightly different. There's a lack of data, of course, as well. When it's in email, you don't get the reporting and the analytics. And I think the challenge that probably you were highlighting to me a few months ago was the fact that you keep getting very similar questions, and we were spending time answering them, and that, whilst it is important to get the business going, took us away from, obviously more interesting, high value work. So I think some of those challenges you also saw at Pinterest. Can you walk us through what the workflow was before? Like when a request came into your, legal@Pinterest inbox, take us from start to finish. What did that look like before?
So before we still have it, a 70-page FAQ document that just one of our contract manager lead took the time to start capturing all of these same FAQs that keep coming in over and over and over again. She had over time learned, what do we need to say to answer these questions. She kept like a running document, ended up being 70 pages long. And so it would be, someone is in charge of answering the inbox. We had a whole system of, okay, if you're out of the office, who's covering for you? So there was always someone in charge of, we knew that needed to answer. Requests would come in, and then the contract manager team would utilize that document to copy the answer to that question that came in and paste it into the response. And then we're still all copied. I mean, so everyone on that alias is getting like, the answer comes in, we see it answered, we see a request back. Sometimes they're looping in accounting, or they're looping in another team. We're all getting copied on every email. That's, sometimes people are good and they take us off the thread, but sometimes that just doesn't happen. And we're just, 5 days into it and they're still talking about it, and it's not even a commercial legal question. And then sometimes there's more escalated questions. So edge cases, or attorney needs to respond to that, or it's very specific to someone has to go find the agreement, download it and send it over, or send a link to it over to someone. So there was kind of two types, like the FAQs, which is the bulk of the inbound requests, and then those kind of more edge cases that we had to kind of get more granular when we answered. So that was kind of the initial, the way it was done is so manual, and just the same questions over and over and over again. Because people think of commercial legal, like we do have a lot of the answers because we work with accounting, we work with purchasing, we work with a bunch of different teams that we touch. I think more than a lot of other legal teams, are the vast majority of our work is just involving other, and then people from across the company asking us to help them do their deals. So we know everyone. And so everyone just comes to, commercial legal to ask us questions when they could be going to the wiki, or they could be going and finding that elsewhere. It's just in their minds. Over time, it's like you train people. Oh, you just ask, anything legal, just ask commercial legal. They'll tell you where to go from there. So we became this like directory of information, and we had to kind of think about, how do we put boundaries in place? Like, what are we not going to answer? Where do we send folks, like in the nicest way? Because we still want to be supportive and help people find the information. It's important, but we've also got to have boundaries for what our team is, staffed to be able to handle, and like what really doesn't make sense for us to handle.
Yeah, totally. And although, as you describe it out, it may seem, hyper manual, and you would think that, that maybe a SaaS company like Pinterest would be, operating in a much more digitized way. It's actually completely normal in the sense of I see so many legal departments operate exactly the same way, which is they're still working out of the shared inbox, and it is a very manual process, and there is a very key person risk in like a person monitoring it, and when they're like in a meeting, then who's actually then getting these requests moved along, and there's a whole bottleneck process, and it's actually a very common problem that I see. So you touched on a good point around like the relationship piece, because I think a lot of people are sometimes scared to implement technology when so much of perhaps the relationship with the business clients are built on like being the go-to person. So how do you think about the balance of that in, on one hand, it's good that the business comes to you. It means they trust you and you're helpful generally. But on the other side, it's like that really, really takes you away from actually adding true business value. And perhaps the paradox is that if you had more time, you can build more meaningful relationships on the things that actually do matter. Anyway, that's my little, opinion. But what's yours? How do you think about it?
I agree. Yeah, it's definitely a balance because we never want to feel, we never want people to be frustrated. Everyone's tried to call and change their flight or talk to like an airline, and it's hard to get someone to answer your question. You have to go through a bot that's, doesn't really understand what you're asking. You have to answer a bunch of questions. It's not really hitting what you're trying to get. You're already frustrated because of it. And so in a workplace setting, like you're just trying to do your job, like you just need the information. This is where I usually went to find it. What do I do now? Now you're sending me away. So it is a balance of like, our company has the resources and the Q&A information available. People just might not know about it. So part of it is just finding the actual policies and finding the actual URL where these policies are hosted internally on our wikis and sending folks there so that now they have any, it's updated in real time. So now it's like, okay, I can bookmark this and this is my answer now. The purchasing policy, I know, or the signature policy. I know if I have a certain agreement over a certain amount of money, this person has to be the one. I don't have to now ask the team every time. I can actually just copy this to my bookmarks and find the answer. So those kind of smaller, lower hanging fruit, as they say, trying to make those, just make the information more easily available to them. But in a way where we're not turning them away, we're just saying, it's faster if you just go right there. You don't even have to wait. And a lot of times now, as a globally scaling company, sometimes the US is closed. We're mostly US based, so sometimes we're off for Memorial Day or some US holiday, but they're working, abroad somewhere else. And so they now have to wait another, 24 business hours to get a response to maybe something that's a critical question. So, it was like, what can we do? We have this like bounce back email for people when they email our alias, and it's like, if you need this, go here. If you need this, go here. If you need this, go here. If you need access to this team. And it's just a bounce back that hopefully responds to most of it. But a lot of times folks, still have to wait a little bit to get a response if we happen to be closed for a holiday or something.
Yeah, very insightful. And obviously that was where you were, but now very excitingly, your shared inbox is powered by GenAI, which, by the way, I think is, GenAI, so many legal departments have been talking about it for the last maybe year and a half, right, since ChatGPT blew it up. I think a lot of people are in exploration phase and dabbling in it, but you've sort of been a bit of a front runner in that you're truly implementing it. So I think there's a lot of interesting insights we'll unpack for the rest of this session. It's now run by can you just explain maybe to start with what that actually means? What does it mean to have a GenAI powered shared inbox?
Yeah, so we took that 70-page document that I talked about earlier that just had the canned questions that FAQs that come in, and then the canned responses that we would usually just copy, someone would physically copy and paste. And we took that, and GenAI is basically, it needs like a training document. And in this case, we're using Checkbox. And so Checkbox is already trained as a bot on GPT. So it already has the ability to interact, but now it needs to know our specific use case. It has to be trained. So it's like hiring a new intern or a new employee to come in and help us. So this employee has context from living in the world and having, experiences in life, but it's like training someone to understand the nuances in our specific department and how we answer questions and where we send people. So we took that 70-page document and basically kind of edited it to slightly to make sure that it answered the questions for the bot in the way that the bot could read and understand. And there's like user acceptance testing. You have to go through a lot of testing to make sure, why is it saying this strange thing? Sometimes it'll misunderstand what you're trying to tell it to say, and so it'll respond to something totally weird. And so you just have to go back and adjust some things and figure out where in the document it's getting that information. And then you just kind of get to the point where, it's like training a new person. It's like having an employee where it's not a one and done, set it and forget it type situation. It's needs to be updated all the time. There might be questions that we're going to get in that we didn't anticipate. It's not on the FAQ document, and the bot for some reason didn't realize that this is an edge case, because we have a response that it should say. If it doesn't know, we want it to specifically say, I don't know. We don't want it to make up stuff, but sometimes it will try to make something up in a minor way. And so we'll have to go in and email the person and like get that adjusted. But over time, that's just going to it's just like having a new person who answered it wrong, and we have to like help with training for that person. So, yeah, it's a continuous process, a lot more effort on the front end for like more of a long-term, more efficient process down the line.
I love that analogy. I think it makes it really easy to understand and get you in the right headspace for how to use AI, because I feel like usually with new technology, and I've seen this cycle over the years, being in this space, is people expect that somehow technology is going to magically, as you say, like one and done, solve the problems with very little effort. And that's rarely the case. There's always going to be some readiness work. In your case, you've already done it in terms of having that 70-page document. That was a sort of like a low effort knowledge management tool that you use for the email inbox pre-AI, right? Like probably a lot of legal departments don't have that 70-page document, and they might need to sift through their sent inbox to even get there. But like there's readiness work, and then there's like working with AI, and then understanding and having some patience around finessing it. You touched on some really important concepts that I think people today are generally thinking about when they think about AI, around accuracy and hallucination. I love your approach of like the importance of having a testing period, and that it's okay, and it's sort of a process that you walk through, very similar to like someone new starting. On the technology side, we think a lot about hallucination and accuracy as well, and there's a lot of technology controls. What else have you thought about in terms of trying to ensure this bot is like go live ready? So besides testing, was there anything else that you did to give comfort to not just yourself, who's obviously a big champion of change, but maybe some of the lawyers and your boss? Like how did you bring them on side as well?
We there's always this apprehension on like what type of data is this AI getting. And like, even though, we have really good, knowledge that we're not using, the company's not using our data to train its models, there's still that risk. And so I think there's like a twofold approach that we took, which was, what can we minimize giving the bot so that it can answer things in a well-read way, a helpful way, but let's not overdo it. Because then if we're giving it so much information, sometimes that gets scrambled. So like, what can we link out? So instead of like, what's the policy on purchasing? We don't need it to spit out the policy on purchasing. We can just say, here's the link to the wiki that has our policy on purchasing. And so we're not giving it a ton of information. It's also not having to be updated every time the purchasing policy is updated. It'll just be updated on the URL, which we're sending to them to access in real time. So we're not putting any sensitive information in there. We're just linking out any internal policies. And so that gave a lot of comfort to the fact that, everyone's really worried about it telling the wrong information or having information it shouldn't have. And it's just, the only links it's getting that it's sending to the person is you have to be logged in through, our Pinterest systems. And it's only going to respond to a Pinterest email address is the other thing that was really comfortable for folks.
Yeah.
it's not just random someone off the street. It's only going to know to respond if it's an @Pinterest email. So those two things really help mitigate the anxiety, I think, for security, and then also our management team. But it definitely takes a lot of building trust within your team in order to get the buy-in. It's because it does sound scary, and there is a lot of bad PR about AI and what it can do and how it can go wrong. But if
Hmm.
you think through kind of some of those issues, like learn about the tools, you're not technical, like there's lots of ways to learn about it still, even if you're not technical. And so that way you can really think through these issues and partner with your IT team to get it into a place that feels comfortable, that's not too risky, because that is a concern. And we got a lot of questions about that. Our security team, our privacy team was very interested to know what kind of information was being passed through, and even like our corporate legal team and different legal teams, please make sure it's not answering legal questions. We don't want it to be giving legal advice. We don't want it to be giving policy advice. Like we want it to be linking out to everything that it needs to, instead of doing it everything itself.
Yeah, that's really good advice. I feel like the theme here is think about limiting the scope in two sense, the scope of the users who can actually use the tool, so internal Pinterest only, and then limiting the scope of even what the bot is designed to do or answer, right? Non-legal work, non-sensitive, not like high complexity, high risk type of use cases. And so I think you're right. Like a lot of the times when we use, let's say, ChatGPT, we're not worried about putting in the ingredients of our fridge into the tool and asking, what can I, create me a recipe? Because that's not actually sensitive information that someone now knows what's in my fridge. And so when you extrapolate that to sort of the business level, there are definitely use cases of AI where it is a lot lower in risk profile, where you can start to build that muscle and create these efficiencies today rather than waiting or standing back and being scared to engage. So that's really good advice. We've got a question here, by the way, from Bree from the audience. She says, hi there. If there is an edge case, one, what does the response read? And two, what is the next step of the legal operational process? Meaning, how does the team then like route that edge case? It's a great question. So over to you, Erin.
Yeah. So right now we just started with the bot. There's a lot of functionality within Checkbox that we're looking into. We wanted to start small and then kind of add. So right now it's taking care of most of our FAQs. The edge cases go to it tells it to email our other alias. So in certain situations, if it doesn't know the answer, it says, "I'm so sorry, I can't answer this question. Please email this other alias, our secret alias that we don't advertise on any internal wikis or anything." It's only in certain cases where it can't answer the question, or it knows it shouldn't, that it sends over for a human to answer. And then it has the person email us again at a different inbox. Ideally, what we would like to do is hook up like the ticketing component so that it automatically would just go and get assigned to someone. And that's like another component of Checkbox technology that we haven't implemented, because we didn't want to boil the ocean. Let's start small, see how it goes, and then kind of add things as needed. But eventually we will have more of a Jira type ticketing system where it gets assigned out, and then there's a better way of tracking it. Right now it's a little bit more manual. It is cutting out a lot of just the FAQ stuff, like 70% of what comes in. There is that still 30% still that's going to remain for a little bit longer, where we're going to have to manually figure out who's going to respond.
That's great. And again, I think you've embedded some great learnings there as well for people. It's like with technology, there's always going to be so much functionality that can go like broad and deep, but you really want to pick what is the smallest low-hanging fruit to really drive like success as early as possible. So you get those wins on the board to then implement more change and expand from there. So yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's a lot to try to do everything all at one time for the team, from a just training process of like, okay, here's a new way we're going to be doing things. Just doing it little by little, I think is a little bit more digestible, because once we have the wins, like you said, we can get through and then be like, okay, so since this is working, here's another way we could add to the efficiency. That typically, in my experience, has gone a little bit more smoothly. from an adoption perspective and a technical perspective, because there's things as you're trying things out that you're realizing, oh, I'm glad we didn't implement it that way because that wouldn't have worked, or based on the way our setup is, like that actually isn't ideal. So getting in there, getting the questions, kind of like a build, measure, learn kind of mentality about it, and then to try to replicate the product people. We try to do that over on our side as much as we can.
Yeah, very cool. That's a lean startup methodology that you've just dropped there. That was I learned at the very beginning of my startup career, so that's really cool to hear that again. We have another follow-up question actually, which is, how do you adjust these enterprise-wide teams to change? So what was the change management approach that you used to get these teams to, to now engage with the bot?
I think we just kind of turned it on. We didn't tell anyone we were doing it, because I think once, and I think we asked you actually, Evan, about your opinion about this, and you said, and I think it was right, that if you tell people about it, they're automatically going to be a little freaked out about it because it's just like, oh, now I'm going to have to talk to a bot. Or if you just turn it on and just kind of let it, you're monitoring it. So like we're looking at you can go into your dashboard and see what inquiries are coming in, how is it responding, and you can go in like on a daily basis and follow up with someone if you're feeling like, oh, that wasn't right, or correct things as it comes through manually. And because there is that like front end kind of like work that you have to do to refine it, just like looking over the shoulder of an intern. But we specifically didn't really do a lot on the communications for outside of our team, because it's conversational. It's you give it a persona when you set it up. So you say you're a world-class legal assistant at Pinterest, and you are going to respond by in a friendly, professional way, and so you tell the bot how to act. You can also give it like a funny persona like Dumbledore, I've heard too, to make it sound different and fun based on the time of year or something, but we haven't done that. But you give it a persona, it sounds like a person, it's conversational, it's not bot sounding. And so we thought that for most of the questions, they're just going to get the response back, and they won't necessarily even be thinking that it's not a person on the other end. And then we'll be monitoring in times where it has gone wrong. We'll be monitoring that and following up with folks as that happens.
Yeah. And if it wasn't clear in the way, I know that people can't like visualize it on this particular session, but if it wasn't clear, the people interacting with your shared inbox is interacting with it like they always have. There's actually no change in that sense. So the question around like, how have we conducted change management? The answer is, well, we didn't really have to, because we haven't had to change the behavior of how people came to legal. Sure, the way that we now respond to the questions is through AI, but it wasn't like traditional technology implementations where you now had to say, oh, like log into this new system and click this button and now fill in this form. On top of all these other systems that you probably have to work with. No, it's just, you're already sending us emails, just keep doing it the way you used to. And now we will, just in the background, gain the efficiencies on the legal side without having to create a whole bunch of change for the business, right? It's interesting. I like the it's almost counterintuitive what you mentioned around not communicating that change, at least on the back end to the business. I think it made me think about, I think people use like spell check on Word sometimes nowadays as like an example of AI that we've always been using for a while. And I feel like if you told lawyers that spell check had AI when it came out, the adoption of that would be significantly lower because they would be scared of AI, reading documents and things like that. So it's almost a little bit of like, you got to find the right balance of what helps drive change versus maybe impedes it, right, in this case. So very
Absolutely.
cool. Okay, so it's still early days. I know it's still early days for you. But what impact do you think this will have? Like, what do you anticipate to be the difference now for the legal team or the business? We talked about kind of the challenges, I think, but like, if you can make it explicit, like, what are you anticipating in terms of the impact of this change here?
Well, I think from an employee perspective, it is kind of a bummer if like a lot of your day is just copying and pasting the same thing over and over again and hitting send on an email. Like
Mm,
that's not stimulating. That's not a very like fun thing to do for your job. Like, and so one of the big things that I thought was a benefit is just removing this repetitive, less meaningful work out of a person's day and giving them the opportunity to get involved in more meaningful projects and more meaningful work in other ways. So now they're freed up time to like help us analyze the history of a deal a little bit more, or now they can spend time researching a special project or pulling information or helping us find information better, and that helps build their skill set and it helps them feel like they're actually contributing in a more meaningful way to the company and to their own professional career growth. So that was like number one for me because I know I've done jobs like that. It's a real bummer. So what can we do to just get rid of stuff like that for people? And then also just from an efficiency standpoint, yeah, one of our KPIs is efficiency. Now we can show we are able to reduce manual intake and response to a lot of our inbound questions. And I think that's a big win for management to see. And it's also going to, changing AI landscape and the technology available to legal teams is changing at such a rapid pace. So
mm,
jumping on board in even a small way like this, tees us up to adopt more technology in the future because now our team understands user acceptance testing and they understand how to project manage implementing a new technology into the team. When they haven't really had to do that a lot in their jobs, they're more like contract manager type folks. And so, they're expanding their skill sets, and our team is now being more ready to adopt future technology in a way that seems less scary for us because now we've done it.
mm.
We know what's entailed, and we have a process for it. And we have now a nice, refined source document that our AI was trained on. We can now use that in other ways, and we can use the learnings from that to adopt, other types of things like, a contract analysis AI that pulls out, contractual language based on your playbook, and all those technologies that are coming out for legal, things that we can't even anticipate in the long term.
Mm.
This is taking a step towards keeping up with this rapid change that technology is presenting to us at this kind of new era for the legal industry.
Yeah, that's a great attitude and a great culture. I'm so happy for you and your team. And you just touched on really interesting. A lot of even the learnings you just mentioned is translatable. It's not necessarily specific to implementing AI. It is a lot of the learnings are around implementing technology, right? And I think we have another question that's just come in from the audience, which is related to that. So it ties nicely. The question reads, where does the bot sit within the various systems of the company? What does the technical implementation process look like? And I'm going to dovetail that into a question I have as well, which is there is always the technical implementation piece, right? I know for you, part of that is obviously setting up the email itself with IT to set up the rules for forwarding and the IT kind of email-y stuff, right? And then there's the second part, which is more novel, to do with the actual Gen AI component, like the actual Gen AI setup. And I think you touch a little bit on that. But yeah, if you maybe answer the audience question, my question, which is, what does the whole setup or the implementation process actually look like? And maybe you can sprinkle in some learnings as well, having gone through it.
Yeah, great question because I just thought you just turn it on and hook it up to your email. Um, Turns out it's a little bit more complicated. And luckily we have an IT team that really was supportive of this. But yeah, it just integrates into your, Outlook or your Gmail or whatever your company uses for an email server. And it integrates. So you have we have it so that you have to be signed in through Okta to access the Checkbox platform, the dashboard, so that the administrators can kind of see all the questions that are coming in, and do testing and do all of the configuring through the dashboard that you have to, and it's in your Okta, like a tile on your Okta homepage. But as far as like, there's just this connection between, and it's magic because I don't really know how it works. But it's like email forwarding between your Outlook or your Gmail that connects into Checkbox's bot, and it knows how to forward the question appropriately from the bot to the requester and back and forth. So yeah, it's just back end IT kind of stuff where they talk about email forwarding and all a bunch of acronyms that I still don't know what they are talking about. And there's this back end setup where it knows to connect, and then it somehow they're able to tell it only answer at Pinterest email. And so there's like a couple of components. There's the Okta login for the administrator piece, and then just from a like user perspective, they're just emailing it, and that's going directly to the bot and back and forth.
And then that's helpful. And then to summarize the Gen AI part, you're saying before you've got the source document that you had before anyway. And I think different organizations might have like a wiki page that they might have their knowledge sitting in, or policy documents. And so that's sort of like your corpus of responses or knowledge. And you've taken that, you've cleaned it up a little bit to make it more AI friendly. And I think some of the, like, just to share with the audience, maybe some examples are, instead of a diagram, like describe the diagram in words, right? Or instead of using language like, because I know you used yours is kind of like email reply template. So it might be like, oh, thanks for your response, I hope you're well. Like that, the AI doesn't need, right? So we can take out like the flowery language, but you're really doing the tweak to the source documents to make it more efficient for the AI. And then you're clicking an upload button, you're just uploading it, right?
You just upload, you just upload it into the dashboard for your bot, and you can have several different bots that are hooked up to several different emails. And then for each one, you have a source document. You're just, it's just like you click on the button, you upload it from your computer, the newest version, because you're, a lot of, especially at the beginning, you're changing it and you're doing different versions of it. Click the most recent version and upload that in, and now it's working off of that. So it's just like a pretty quick. Now it's just training on this new source document. Whenever you want to update it, you just go in and get your Word, pulled up, or your Google Doc pulled up, make your adjustments, and then upload that into Checkbox. And then that's how it gets updated with the bot.
Yeah. I'm excited for the next phase of your implementation where, like you said, you kind of start to connect it with ticketing. Some people don't like the word ticketing, so I'll use the word matter management. So I'm excited for that, and also the ability for the responses to also link out to actual workflows to get actual things done as well. Because I think with the bot, it doesn't just consume a single source document, it can consume multiple along with different types of workflows. And so at some point it's intelligent enough to say, well, based on this request, I'm going to reach into this source document and pull out this answer. And oh, we have this workflow that's also relevant, and I'm going to serve those together so that the user gets the response and is able to, finish off whatever self-service or process with a lawyer. So I'm excited for that next phase, and maybe we'll have you come back on again to discuss that. I've got another question from the audience, from Kelly this time. She asks, how are you making sure that the source documents remain fresh, especially if the content is managed and owned by multiple different functional teams? It's a good question, Kelly. So Erin, how do you do it?
Yeah, we try not to answer every single question within the response into the email. We try to link out as much as we can to wiki pages, because those are where things are getting updated. So we just, if you're asking, what's the policy on some type of compliance question, we're not going to answer that in the email. We're going to say, thank you for, your question. It sounds like you have a question for the compliance team. I think your question was related to, XYZ. Please find, the link to the compliance wiki page here. And so it'll just link out, it'll acknowledge their question, it'll tell them what it thinks they asked, and then it'll provide a response and a place to go to navigate. But it's not in the body of the email saying the policy on that is because those change. And yeah, it would be so hard for us to have to remember, oh, compliance updated that policy. Oh, purchasing updated the purchasing policy. Oh, accounting now updated that policy. It's too much for us to try to like always be updating at all times. So each of those teams has a wiki page within Pinterest. And so we're just linking out to whichever document or wiki page that's, where they're keeping this, archived or latest version of whatever policy or procedure their team wants you to know about. We have Google Docs, and there's a wiki pages that we link to. So yeah, we don't. It's we just want to avoid trying to have to do that because it's way too manual.
Mhm. Absolutely. I've seen teams that have a hybrid approach as well, depending again on the use case, because I think, Erin, what you've designed here makes complete sense from like a low maintenance perspective. Linking out is a fantastic way to ensure that we're always referencing the latest and greatest. I know that teams do that approach together with like policies and rules that either one don't get changed at all very often, and so the bot can kind of consume directly from it, and then if it then goes to more volatile content, it links out. But also there's a second use case. Like I've seen teams use this AI for things like delegation of authority, and in that case their actual policy document is the problem, in the sense that there is just so much complexity in the tables that they have, and like all the factors that must be considered, and these exception rules, and like a human gets completely lost in trying to read that. And so even if you link out to that policy, like people are still confused. And so there'll be some use cases where the bot like is consuming directly that document and then giving the answer in a very kind of clear-cut human response. But I think the hybrid approach, and back to what you were talking about before, it's like carving out the right use cases with the right design under the right scope is a very like intellectual decision. And I think, yeah, there's so many ways to use AI, and I think we're all still kind of new to it, but it's really good to share these learnings, given that I think we've begun to do some real stuff here. And there's more questions coming through. Sorry. So I think Kelly has a follow-up. Oh, okay, this is a good one from Kelly. She says, if the content overlaps, how are you making sure that the bot is targeting the responses to the applicable content?
I'm trying to think of a case where that's the case. Usually it'll just know by the keyword, like a policy on X. It'll know this is where I send you. It'll send you maybe to an overall wiki page, maybe not just like the policy page of the under that wiki page, but just like the general page, the landing page of the team. But yeah, we don't I don't think we've run into that as much as an issue. Um, and if it doesn't know, it'll just that's when we have to like manually answer. If it's like a more of a complicated, they want a bunch of different stuff and it's hard for it to figure out which answer it should give, it'll just default to having us manually answer. We haven't really come, I haven't seen those types of questions come through for us often. But yeah, I think that would probably be like one that has to get manually answered if it's too confusing for the bot.
Yeah, I always say like it's a real concern, like it's a real consideration, but I always say if you gave conflicting information from multiple different policy documents to a human being and asked them like what they should do in this scenario, like in terms of to interact with the policy, the human would not know what to do. Like they would get confused too. They'd be like, oh, what? Like, I don't know. This is all conflicting information. So it comes back down to actually like knowledge management and governance at the root of it, right? Like technology is an enabling layer. It's not going to suddenly figure out inconsistencies because a human can't do that, right? It needs to be a human decision and a governance to then enable tools like the one we're talking about. So hopefully that helps Kelly. I think Kelly also suggested or asked whether Checkbox has a way to automate the reformatting of content to make it more AI consumable. The answer is, I wish we did. That'd be a really cool feature to like upload something and then it like the AI turns it to be more AI friendly. That's like meta AI. But the answer is no. At the moment, our customer success team works with our customers like Erin, and we pass on best practices and help shape up your documents for you. But it's a great suggestion. I'll send it to the product team. Let's see. We've got one last question in the audience, I think, that's sitting here. That is, can you explain how you know which inquiries are successfully answered versus not? And so how do you address the ones that are left open? Are there parameters set in place, such as you can only go back and forth a certain amount of time before it gets forwarded to the team? Cool. So how do you know when something doesn't get answered correctly, or it can't, in your tool, Erin?
We are doing a lot of just monitoring the dashboard. So we're like on a daily basis looking through the questions that are coming in and making sure the responses are accurate. And if they're not, we're following up directly. And it's just unfortunately kind of a manual, especially at the front end of the process. It's very manual. We are hoping as it learns over time, it'll be better about saying when to email our alias. But sometimes we haven't realized, like, oh, we need to tell it to do that. So we're kind of as we learn what kind of questions are coming in, we're editing the document to match some of these like kind of nuanced questions that are coming in. So over time, it'll get smarter about being able to know when it can't respond and what to do in that situation. But especially at the beginning, we're still in that phase of trying to figure it out. So it's definitely more of a manual process right now. And then, going forward, it still will be. I mean, there's going to be just someone who checks in with it consistently to make sure that folks are getting what they need and that we're not leaving anyone hanging.
Yeah. And Kelly's just asked to follow up around, like, so does the bot have a memory of these chats? And the answer is yes. Memory is a really cool word. We don't use that, but like an audit trail, right? Like you can actually see a record of all of the questions and responses that has occurred between the bot and people asking it questions. And that's what you mean by dashboard, right, Erin? When you're kind of monitoring what's coming through, you're actually looking at that transcript or the record of everything that's come through. There's also a filter, by the way, Kelly, that you can set to show only the responses where the bot could not answer. And so you can also see very quickly where maybe there's some gaps in the policy or knowledge that the bot is trained on. But I like that. Like the human in the loop is another very important concept to AI nowadays that we're all coming to learn with. It's like trust but validate, right, is kind of the motto. You need to trust AI to do AI's job, because otherwise, if you end up like, I've heard of people who use like an AI contract review tool, and then they use it, but then they spend just as long checking the AI's work and then redoing it to the point where the ROI is now negative for implementing the technology. So you kind of want to trust it, but still have the option to verify. So human in the loop is important. But let me finish with one wrapping question to you, Erin, which is thinking kind of broader, bigger picture. You're one of the first to dabble and implement GenAI in legal departments. What are your thoughts about GenAI generally for the legal industry? And then I don't even want to say in the next X years, because I feel like this is moving so quickly. So I'm just gonna cap the question at that. Like, what are your views for the impact of AI on the legal industry and in the near future?
Yeah, I don't think it's going to replace, but I think it's going to very much make our lives a lot easier when it comes to just like composing a quick response to something, to summarizing an issue. Sometimes it's like really hard to contextualize for a non-legal person when I'm trying to explain, when I'm doing my other piece of my job, which is commercial counsel, and I'm trying to explain to a business stakeholder some of the issues that I'm seeing involved in the negotiations, and having a tool that I could just like type in like stream of consciousness thoughts about this and say, please write this in a concise way to a non-legal stakeholder. And it can summarize my my thoughts like in a more succinct, approachable way. So there's things like that. I think that's just going to change like the pace and the ability for us to communicate better over time and faster. There's of course ethical and regulatory consideration. So a lot of it is just staying on top of webinars and conferences and subscribe to some Substacks and stay on top of it. Like find some people on LinkedIn to follow that are thought leaders in this space when it comes to legal and AI, and just continue to stay on top of it and try to participate with it as much as you can, because it's one thing to be kind of a sideline watcher and understand it from that perspective, but it really helped me adjust my understanding of what goes into this technology when I was actually in it and working on it. So there's so much future opportunity for AI to really make our lives much easier, like a central place we can ask it a question and it knows everything about about every document in our organization, and we can ask it and it'll tell us immediately. There's no having to go find it. Just things like that. It's going to happen fast, and as we just have to stay up incrementally. It's harder to jump from A to C if you haven't gotten to B yet. So yeah, that's where I think it's just engaging with it, trying to stay curious, and not being afraid of it, because the more you know about it, the less scary it can get.
Wow, that is an amazing wrapper. I could not agree more. There is so much that you learn by doing rather than just reading theoretically as well. Both are important, but that is great advice. But otherwise, I'm going to wrap up by saying, Erin, thank you. This was an incredible conversation. You've been super gracious with the candor and your experience. I think there is a lot to be learned in the industry around all of this, and these conversations really help move the needle. So thank you again for being so generous with your time and also your advice today.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. All right, Erin, I'll see you soon enough, I'm sure. And I do want those tips on how to raise my little plant baby. So we'll have a separate session on that together. All right. Have a lovely rest of your day. And for everyone else, thanks for tuning in. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Go with the Workflow. If you found it valuable, you can subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app like Spotify or Apple Podcast. Also, please consider giving us a rating or leave a review, as that really helps other listeners find the podcast too. That's all for now, so we'll see you at the next episode.